fantasy. Caught in a landslide. No escape from reality.
I want to assemble a task force of the most dangerous people on the planet.
They're bad guys. Worst of the worst.
Hello, and welcome to Film Rant. The summer blockbusters roll on and we've hit yet another biggest film of the year candidate, Suicide Squad, directed by David Ayer. I'll state from the off that I'm not too familiar with all of the characters featured in this movie, so don't expect a review purely based off of comic expectations. I'm very much a casual when it comes to these characters, so I may have a very different opinion to a lot of you with regards to the characters. After the absolute sheer misery that was Batman v Superman, this couldn't be any worse, right? Well, I'm going to go into spoiler territory to answer that, so beware from here on out. There's quite a few characters in this movie, so I'll try and go through them as best I can. Let's start with Harley Quinn, played by Margot Robbie. I'm vaguely familiar with Harley because of the Batman Arkham games, but outside of those I've not been exposed to her. That said, I thought Margot was a solid casting choice for the part. I could totally see her pulling it off. Problem is, I'm not quite sure if she did it for me. Throughout the movie I felt like I could tell Margot was acting. I'm not sure if she was just trying too hard to seem crazy or if it was just a case of the script being very in your face. I mean, they literally wrote the word damaged on the Joker's head, for Christ's sake, there's no subtlety here, but I just couldn't really get on board with her. I've heard some people say that that's actually Harley's character, that she's someone who is a little crazy but she overacts the crazy to try and play up to the Joker. A little like when your friends are like, "I'm so drunk," after they've had a blue WKD and a Jaeger bomb on a Friday night. Harley's character was fine and enjoyable, she's pretty funny at some points, but I just couldn't see past Margot Robbie's acting enough for me to fully get on board with her as a real character. I've read things about her over-sexualization, such as her short shorts and suggestive actions, like when she licks the prison bars at the start of the movie. I don't really know what the real Harley is meant to be like, but they don't really need to over-sexualize her in any way. Margot Robbie is gorgeous enough as it is that David Ayer didn't need to dress her in skimpy clothes and make her simulate blowjobs to tell the audience, "Look, she's hot!" Now let's talk about her partner in crime, the Joker, played by Jared Leto. He and her become the kings and queens of Gotham after he brings her closer to the edge of insanity. It's hard to tell if their love is genuine or a beautiful lie. That's up in the air. From what I gather, they are actually in love, or at least Harley loves him in more source material. I also get that impression in this movie. It's just a shame that Suicide Squad didn't have more time to explore the origins of their relationship. It rushes through their backstory like a hurricane, and I would have liked to have seen Harley slowly descend into madness rather than rush into madness. Jared himself as the Joker was perfectly serviceable. He was enjoyable to watch and seemed like an interesting guy. He did lack a bit of that charisma though that the Joker really needs, and I don't think he was in the movie enough to let me give him a fair judgment of his performance. But I like what I've seen so far, even if he did seem more of an over-exaggerated chav than the clown of Gotham. That's my thoughts on the Joker, but I've got some more 30 Seconds to Mars quips I can fit in, so bear with me. The Joker decides to search and destroy Waller and the squad because they have taken Harley from him. Outside of Gotham, I bet he feels like a stranger in a strange land, but that still won't stop him from launching an attack, all to preserve the fantasy of his and Harley's romance. He begins as a hunter and nearly ends up as her saviour. Actually, the whole motivation for the squad themselves is do or die. Okay, I really have to stop myself here, I could go on forever. Moving on. Will Smith's Deadshot was probably my favourite character. He was exceptionally witty, fairly grounded and easily the most entertaining character. His personal story is quite endearing and he played a much bigger role than I expected. I mean, I know you don't cast an A-lister like Will Smith to play a small role, but Deadshot was very central to the movie. He seemed to be the leader of the group. There's not much more to say on Deadshot really, other than he's fucking awesome. I enjoyed the use of Batman and the Flash in this movie. They weren't too prominent and simply used to capture a few members of the squad to begin with. It could have been very easy for Ayer to incorporate Batman as a central character, but I'm glad he didn't and could just let the bad guys be bad guys without being watched by the Caped Crusader. Without doubt, the most evil character in the movie for me was Amanda Waller. I get that she's meant to be a stone cold bitch, but damn, she gives the Joker a run for his money. The kind of leverage she has over the squad is fucking savage. There's also a scene where she's saved by the squad and she just ices her fellow government operatives as she says, "They didn't have clearance for this, they knew too much," or something to that effect. She kills Slipknot without a moment's hesitation and wouldn't have any gripes about killing any of the other guys either. I mean, yeah, the squad is comprised of murderers and thieves, but damn, this bitch is crazy. As for the others, Croc was okay with a few comical moments but never really used much. Diablo didn't come out of his shell until about 2/3 of the way through. He was actually quite a tragic character. It's a shame they didn't give us his backstory earlier in the movie and we could have seen his arc develop more naturally as it progressed. Katana and Slipknot were both thrown in last minute, which seemed a little bit pointless. Katana didn't offer much at all and Slipknot was only really there to give legitimacy to Waller's threats. I think he's introduced and then killed in the space of about 5 minutes. Boomerang was the same as Croc. He was okay and gave some good comic relief, but again, didn't really do much. Rick Flag was a very typical government soldier character. The only thing really interesting about him was his personal connection to the villain. The villain being the Enchantress, played by Cara Delevingne. She's sort of underplayed in this movie. David Ayer rightly gives a lot of screen time to developing the squad and their own inner conflicts, but because of that, he sacrifices the villain. The Enchantress was a strange villain, but is extremely two-dimensional. She's all like, "Yeah, brother, help me kill all these knackers because they've turned against us," and he's like, "Sound pet, let's wreck them." Then that's it until the end of the film. She sets up a weapon, which seemed to be some kind of crazy big beam with swirling junk around it. Not like we've seen that in this universe before, is it? She wasn't really a bad villain, but wasn't given any real legitimacy or backstory to make us really want to see her defeated. I would have just liked to have seen some more time dedicated to her development, but I can understand why Aya decided to throw her under the bus a bit in favour of the squad themselves. A big problem with this movie is that it bit off a lot more than it could chew in the runtime, but I'll talk about that a little bit more later. One of the key elements of this movie for me was how Ayer was going to make us get on board with a squad of truly despicable people, and I figured it out. Charisma. All bad characters need charisma for the audience to like them. They may not support their actions or ideals, but if they've got charisma, people can love their characters. To me, that's the whole draw of the Joker. He's charismatic as fuck, and that's what makes him a great villain in my eyes. The same can be said for other movies like Loki in the MCU, Bane in The Dark Knight Rises, or Wilson Fisk in Daredevil. So to make us like this band of utter cretins, Ayer has to make them somewhat charismatic, and he definitely does. Will Smith's Deadshot is witty, clever and ruthless. Margot Robbie's Harley is a little poorly delivered for me, but still has some good lines and quirks. Croc and Boomerang are quite funny in a silly way, which makes them somewhat endearing. Diablo is very serious, but seems to have some element of soul to him. And Leto's Joker wasn't as charismatic as Heath Ledger's, but I don't think any Joker ever will be in a live-action movie after him, but he was at least charismatic enough to give some depth to the Joker. Charisma allows the audience to sort of forget all the horrible crimes these people have committed, and I think Ayer did a really good job in getting us to like the central characters. One thing the movie truly lacked was some true sense of style. It has these few moments here and there where it uses colours and lighting effects, which is pretty cool, but there was no action scenes or editing quirks that made it memorable. It starts off well when it's given us character bios about Deadshot and Harley, and it sort of does it like a featurette, throwing in titles and a whole bio page about each character in a stylised way. That was really cool, and I wish they kept it up, because sadly from there, the movie loses all sense of style and artistry and deflates quicker than your erection if you suddenly think about your parents during sex. I always mention this movie in terms of style because I fucking love it, but Kick-Ass had some really memorable fight scenes and some really fucking cool balls to the wall action. Suicide Squad is set up for all of that, and I feel it's the theme it's going for. The same can be said for Scott Pilgrim, which is absolutely covered in unique visual effects and stylized action scenes. Suicide Squad feels a little generic. It's not bad at all, the fight scenes and the whole movie in general is pretty enjoyable, but I just feel it needed a little more oomph. Give this movie to Edgar Wright or Matthew Vaughn and I guarantee it would have received much better reviews, as it would have had much more style and quality. This is a little thing, but I'm glad the trailers didn't give too much away with regards to the plot. I didn't read much about the movie, but I watched the trailers and I went into this movie fully expecting the villain to be the Joker. Yeah, Harley is in the squad, but that doesn't mean that the Joker couldn't have been the villain. You could have had a situation where the Joker is doing shit Harley doesn't really agree with, and she has to try and find a compromise between both sides. It came as a surprise to me that the villain was in fact the Enchantress, and the Joker was much more of a side character, even if he probably did get more screen time than the Enchantress herself. That's all I want to say really. Well done Warner Brothers for not giving away the entire movie in the trailers. That's what normally happens. I was a little disappointed by the ending. The story sets up the inevitable duel that's going to come between Rick Flag and the Enchantress. We don't see an awful lot of backstory, but we do see enough that we can see they're in love and that if one lost the other, it would be very sad. So the ending battle sees the Enchantress have her heart ripped out and end up begging for death. Flag tries to rescue his girlfriend inside by threatening to stab her heart, which he doesn't care about anymore. He destroys the heart and she dies. We then see Flag look at the cold, lifeless black mould on the floor which was once his girlfriend. Earlier in the movie she says to him, if it's between saving me and killing her, kill her, or something to that effect. That basically tells you that that's exactly what's going to happen. Yet, it was still quite sad and tragic to see Flag staring at the black mass on the floor. That was pretty cool. But then Aya goes and fucking ruins it by having the girlfriend climb out of the black mass like she's literally breaking her own fucking plot armor. I'm all for a happy ending, but that was a very contrived happy ending. People die. Why couldn't Aya just let her die to allow for some form of tragedy at the end? I'd have much preferred that. You may disagree, but it really pissed me off. Deadshot's daughter is quite a prominent figure in his motivations. She's literally his only reason to keep fighting and doing what he's told. The only problem with her is that she is wildly inconsistent. When we're first introduced to her, she's very disapproving of him killing people and basically asks him to pack it in. She's the sympathetic child character, and if anyone in your life can make you change your ways, it's probably going to be your kid. She's very relatable here. I mean, who would want their dad to be a ruthless hitman, right? But then at the end, she's sitting with Deadshot working out some angles for maths homework, and she's all joking like, so if you're standing here and you're killing this guy in the street, then you'd shoot along the hypotenuse, or something like that. I mean, wow, way to change your tune, lady. She goes from disapproving her father's job to joking about it with no obvious catalyst. It's a little thing, but it was very noticeable. Now, I mentioned it earlier, so I'll go into detail a little more on this now, but Suicide Squad bit off a lot more than it could chew. It was a concern to me when they announced this that they're going to have to introduce 8 main characters as well as maybe a villain and supporting characters, while also having to deal with the inner conflicts and personal character building scenes while also following an interesting plot. I mean, that was hard enough to say. I think all in all, David Ayer did a good job with what he had to do. By no means is Suicide Squad a bad movie. It's thoroughly entertaining and doesn't really do a lot wrong, but at the same time it could have been way better if Warner Brothers and DC just held off a little. This movie should have been DC's Avengers. If you argue that DC's Avengers is the Justice League movie, then okay, fair enough. This movie should have been Civil War then. A smaller story that focuses on the already established characters and their conflicts with each other while overcoming a mutual enemy. They could have killed 2 birds with 1 stone. Make a Batman, Flash, Wonder Woman and Aquaman movie where some of the villains in Suicide Squad are the main villain. Then make Justice League and Suicide Squad. This would have allowed Suicide Squad to leave out the whole part of establishing characters and jump right into the formation of the squad and get into their characters on a much more personal level. Suicide Squad didn't really have enough time to run with any of its ideas or really explore any of the characters themselves, which is a shame. For me, Suicide Squad just came out far too early and should have came out much later in Warner Brothers and DC's timeline. They need to be a bit more patient. That said, I still think David Ayer handled the sheer volume of content very well, and he created a film that is by no means deserving of its awful review scores. I always have this critique in extended universe superhero movies, but I have to question. Where the hell was Batman, Flash, Wonder Woman and Aquaman for this movie? Okay, I'm not certain how Aquaman could really help out, but in this extended universe where Batman, Flash and Wonder Woman all exist, you have to believe that they would be interested in taking down a powerful ancient witch who was planning on wiping out the planet and not leaving it in the hands of villains. It's a difficult one to deal with because you can't exactly just say shit like, oh, Batman's busy, because that's not enough. I'm not entirely sure how this issue can be resolved in the context of the DC cinematic universe, but I feel it's a point worth mentioning. From a technical standpoint, this movie moves along at blistering speed, at least in the first half, which is good. It's clear that Ayer wanted the squad formed pronto so we could get into the meat of the story, but it's also clear that this is very much a film of 2 halves, or at least a quarter and 3/4. The first quarter moving along quicker than Shaquille O'Neal's music career and with a certain style, and the other 3/4 moving along a little slower but with no real style. It's like there was 2 different directors for different parts of the movie. It's a little clunkily delivered, which I feel can be forgiven bearing in mind how much Ayer established and got through in the 2 hours 10 minutes this movie was on. In fact, it's a testament to his directing that the movie never felt like 2 hours 10 minutes. I was having fun watching it. I think all in all, Suicide Squad is put together well, even if the first quarter vastly outclasses the rest. Finally, I want to talk about the soundtrack. It's a very surprising mix of songs, most of them being inserted seemingly at random in the movie. The soundtrack features songs from Queen to Kanye to Creedence Clearwater Revival. It really is an eclectic mix, but I don't feel like any of it didn't work. In fact, I'm a little disappointed that the Bohemian Rhapsody that comes in at the end wasn't the whole song. Instead, it's cut when the Joker blasts through the wall to rescue Harley. I would have liked to have seen an extended scene where Joker breaks into the prison to rescue Harley, all synced up to the beats of Bohemian Rhapsody, like they do in that awesome trailer. That would have been fucking rad. So all in all, Suicide Squad is a very enjoyable movie. It definitely bites off more than it could chew and should have came out maybe a few years from now when the characters were already established, but Ayer does a brilliant job making them more likeable and has ultimately produced a movie that deals very well with the mass amounts of content it had to get through. There's a few inconsistencies with characters, a few plot elements I didn't like, and a distinct lack of style or memorable scenes given that this is balls to the wall stuff. The villain is neglected a lot to allow development for the main characters, which is a somewhat forgivable sacrifice. The movie could have done with some more oomph and a little more polish, but I think AI has produced a movie that I could easily watch again and without doubt trumps Batman v Superman in every single aspect. Suicide Squad does not deserve any of the terrible reviews it's been getting from critics. It's easily a 7 out of 10 for me, but that's not my grading scale. You know me better than that, guys. Suicide Squad gets 3.5 frames out of 5. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on Film Rant.
Really matters.